courtroom pressure reaches a breaking point as Pooh Shiesty locks eyes with Gucci Mane, challenging him face-to-face over accusations that could destroy reputations forever. And what once looked like an unbreakable 1017 bond now fractures in real time, turning into a chaotic storm of betrayal, finger-pointing, and dangerous truths as Pooh Shiesty begins dragging more names into the fire, shifting the entire narrative in ways nobody saw coming. Then everything changed. On April 2nd, 2026, the United States Department of Justice stepped in front of cameras in Dallas, Texas, and delivered a statement that froze the culture mid-breath. 9 individuals, including a rapper the industry was waiting to see rise again, were officially hit with federal kidnapping and armed robbery charges, and at the center of it all stood a victim whose name carried legendary weight in trap music: history. This wasn't gossip. This wasn't speculation. This was the United States government presenting a formal criminal case backed by overwhelming proof, including ankle monitor tracking, surveillance recordings, fingerprint matches, rental, vehicle data, bus travel logs, and even social media posts where stolen jewelry was allegedly shown off hours later. At the center of the indictment was Lantrell Williams Jr., known to the world as Pooh Shiesty, and the man prosecutors say he threatened at gunpoint, forcing him to sign away contractual control while staring down an AK-style weapon, was not a stranger but his own mentor, the man who believed in him when few did, Gucci Mane. This isn't just a conflict, it's a collapse. And it doesn't begin with music or internet drama, but inside a federal courtroom where the consequences could cost Pooh Shiesty everything, including his freedom for life. These weren't ordinary charges, they were federal, which means stricter. Sentencing rules, time in federal prisons, and a system that rarely misses when it moves. And when a reporter pressed for how much time these men could actually face, the response from the U.S. attorney landed like a warning shot that echoed far beyond the room, explaining there was no fixed minimum and that sentencing could fall anywhere within a wide spectrum controlled by the judge, stretching from nothing at all to life behind bars, a range so extreme it reframed the entire situation instantly. And for Pooh Shiesty, the reality cut even deeper because this wasn't just a free man making a reckless move. This was someone already under federal supervision, confined to home detention while finishing a 63-month sentence tied to a prior firearms conspiracy case out of Florida, and committing another alleged federal crime under those conditions is what prosecutors call an aggravating factor, which in simple terms means the consequences only get heavier from here. And as authorities moved quickly, 8 of the 9 suspects were taken into custody on April 1st, 2026 across multiple cities including Dallas, Memphis, and Nashville, while 1 individual remained on the run, triggering an active search effort involving multiple agencies, as the FBI's Dallas Violent Crimes Task Force coordinated with teams across Memphis, Nashville, Little Rock, Birmingham, and Atlanta to execute a synchronized wave of arrests, proving this wasn't random chaos but a calculated operation that had been quietly building for months. And while the internet debated details, one key fact was being overlooked. Everything traces back to January 10th, 2026. The day everything changed, and before diving into what unfolded inside that studio, you have to understand how Pooh Shiesty and Gucci Mane went from mentor and protege to enemies standing on opposite sides of a life-altering moment, because years before any alleged confrontation, it was Gucci Mane who opened the door, handing Pooh Shiesty not just a deal, but a chance to become something far bigger than himself. That's what loyalty is supposed to look like, at least on the surface. But behind that image, something shifted. Something deeper than contracts or money, something personal. And while Pooh Shiesty was locked away, a moment unfolded that many believe quietly rewrote everything between him and Gucci Mane. And it didn't start in a studio or a boardroom. It started with loss because in 2023, his cousin Big Scar, born Alexander Woods, another artist tied to 1017, passed away. And the impact of that hit hard, not just for Pooh Shiesty's family, but for the entire Memphis scene. And what came after didn't heal anything. It fractured it further. Because according to reports and street whispers, there was tension around how things were handled, with claims that Gucci Mane didn't show enough support during the funeral, and even more controversial accusations that requests were made for chains and jewelry to be returned after Big Scar's death. And whether every detail is perfectly accurate or not, the feeling it created was real, a growing belief inside Pooh Shiesty's circle, including Big 30, that loyalty had limits, that when things became personal, the bond didn't hold the same weight. And while all of this was unfolding, Pooh Shiesty sat in a cell, grieving, watching from a distance, holding on to questions that didn't have easy answers, waiting for the day he could step back into the world and take control of his future. And by October 2024, Gucci Mane made a move that surprised many, cutting most of the 1017 roster for financial reasons. yet keeping Pooh Shiesty and Fujiano, signaling that he still saw value in him, still believed in him, at least publicly. But when Pooh Shiesty came home in October 2025 under strict home detention with an ankle monitor, things weren't the same, because when contract talks came up, the numbers on the table didn't match his expectations. Not after a Billboard success, not after momentum returned, not while rival interest from Yo Gotti's CMG hovered in the background, creating a pressure point that only intensified the situation, and according to federal investigators, that frustration over his deal became the driving force behind what would happen next. Not music, not diss records, but a business dispute that allegedly escalated into something far darker, because instead of lawyers, the accusation is that he came prepared with paperwork and force, and what makes it even heavier is that just before all of this, he had publicly called Gucci Mane his inspiration, his blueprint, someone he studied and respected, repeating advice about having a head start, about learning from the past, words that sounded powerful in interviews but didn't hold when reality tested them. Because on January 10th, 2026, inside a Dallas recording studio, everything shifted. And according to federal agent Brittany Garcia's report, what Gucci Mane walked into that afternoon was supposed to be business, just a meeting, nothing more. When they first arrived, the studio doors were still locked, forcing Gucci Mane and his team to kill time, so they stepped out to a nearby liquor store, grabbed bottles and red plastic cups, and came back unaware they were walking into something far darker than a simple session. While at the same time, Pooh Shiesty's father, Lantrell Williams Sr., was actively setting the stage, repeatedly calling the studio owner until he finally secured access around 2:53 p.m., presenting it as nothing more than a routine booking. For music, a normal session, nothing suspicious, nothing alarming. And by 3:15 p.m., the studio opened. Gucci Mane, his cameraman, his associate, and his security settled in casually, turning on a football game, pouring drinks, relaxing into what they believed was business as usual. Until everything shifted at exactly 3:43 p.m., when Pooh Shiesty walked in with 8 others, and surveillance later captured one of them stepping out briefly before returning with a bag slung over his shoulder, a bag that would soon become the center of everything. But before it was even opened, the real move began, because Pooh Shiesty calmly asked Gucci Mane for a private conversation, suggesting they step into the recording booth away from everyone else, and without hesitation, Gucci Mane agreed, stepping inside, not realizing he wasn't walking into a discussion but into a setup, because right behind him came Lantrell Williams, Sr. and Big 30, turning it into 3 against 1, while outside, in the control room, the rest of Pooh Shiesty's crew surrounded the remaining members of Gucci Mane's team. And in that moment, the atmosphere shifted from calm to controlled, because this was never a conversation, it was a trap, and once everyone was in place, it unfolded exactly as planned, with Pooh Shiesty pulling out pre-prepared contract release documents and demanding a signature, documents that had been printed earlier that day, evidence later confirmed through store records, proving this wasn't spontaneous but calculated. And when Gucci Mane refused, tension exploded, voices rose, and then everything escalated, as Big 30 was told to retrieve the bag, and seconds later, an AK-style weapon was drawn and pointed directly at Gucci Mane, turning negotiation into force. And under pressure, he signed, while someone recorded the moment, capturing him verbally, confirming the release, then forcing him to add a date, sealing it before valuables were taken. And outside the booth, things turned just as violent. As weapons came out, victims were restrained, items were stolen, and even when an undercover officer attempted to intervene, the situation was too dangerous to stop, and when it was over, the group disappeared. But what they left behind was a trail of evidence that would follow them everywhere. In the aftermath, even more details began to surface, including one chilling development involving a Dodge Charger Hellcat linked to Pooh Shiesty's father, reported stolen from a Dallas hotel on the morning of January 11th, adding another layer to an already unraveling situation. But what truly sealed everything wasn't a witness or a confession, it was technology. Because Pooh Shiesty's own ankle monitor, the very device meant to track and restrict his movement, placed him precisely at the scene at the exact moment the crime unfolded, removing all doubt without a single word being spoken. And when the arrests were made public on April 2nd, the internet split instantly into 2 sides, with one half focused on Pooh Shiesty and the charges closing in around him, while the other turned toward Gucci Mane, asking the question that always follows in moments like this. Did he cooperate? Did he speak? And in response, Gucci Mane went live, standing firm, rejecting any accusations, insisting he doesn't involve himself with law enforcement, presenting himself as someone who handles situations on his own terms, while posting images of his jewelry and delivering indirect warnings that only fueled the tension further, and those close to him pushed back hard, arguing that labeling him a snitch ignored the overwhelming evidence already gathered, because the case wasn't built on words, it was built on data, including GPS tracking, surveillance footage, undercover presence, fingerprint matches, vehicle logs, AirTag signals, social media trails, and confirmed travel records, all pointing in the same direction long before anyone said anything publicly. Yet debates don't follow logic, and the argument continues. But what cannot be argued is the legal reality, because any agreement signed under force holds no weight in court, meaning the entire situation, the supposed contract release, achieves nothing except increasing the consequences. And instead of walking away free, Pooh Shiesty now faces even greater time, despite having just returned from prison, rebuilding momentum, commanding major performance fees, and standing at the peak of opportunity, only to risk everything over a moment that legally changes nothing. And as the case moves forward with no trial date yet set, one truth remains unavoidable. The evidence is heavy, the stakes are higher than ever, and for Pooh Shiesty, the future now hangs by a thread shaped by choices that cannot be undone.